Hey everyone, welcome back to BelleAire Radio. I am your host again, Kiara Kelly, and I am here with
Professor Lipscomb. I appreciate you having me on your show, Kiara.
No problem. We always love it when you're on our show.
And I love Channel 142 HBCU. You know, the Dallas Cowboys haven't been doing so well in football, so I haven't been on the Sirius XM NFL channel as much lately, so I've been over on Channel 142. I heard a great show the other day with the FAMU. And some of the students were interviewing people at a career fair. And we've got a career fair coming up this Friday over at Bennett College. So I'm hoping we can do a show like the one they did. Do you like going to the career fairs?
Yes, I love it. You actually learn a lot. And this year, it's going to be more hands-on, where we're going to be able to get interviews for graduating seniors 2016, which is coming up. So I think that's kind of cool because we never had that before.
Are you thinking you want to have a job when you get done?
Yes.
Maybe there's some way we can fail you so you'll have to stay around for another year.
No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you.
Hey, so what do we got going on this show? I've been looking forward to this all week.
Yes, this week is actually really, really exciting. We profile 3 people here on Bennett's campus. A lot of our correspondents are doing interviews. One of our correspondents, Cymone Baker, does an interview with a Bennett alum.
That's Miss Theresa Bennett-Wilkes.
Yes.
She's an author, and I love hearing from the Bennett alumni because they talk a lot about what life was like in an older era at Bennett College. Do you have a reaction when you listen to some of the Bennett alumni or get a chance to meet them at various events?
It's very interesting because a lot of things that they went through back in the day, whether that's in dorms or just, at homecoming or whatever, we go through the same thing. So it's kind of interesting to see, like, years later, the same thing is kind of repetitive.
Right, and I actually sometimes think the opposite happens because I came in upon a class conversation the other day where the students were talking about that the cafe lattes that they served at the Starbucks weren't cold enough and the ice wasn't properly chilled. So I think maybe sometimes I kind of get the feeling that the Bennett students or students in any university or college today maybe have it a little bit easier or a little bit more spoiled. Do you think that's too harsh of an opinion?
No, I can agree to a certain extent. I feel like when we hear alums stories and what they went through. And
do you ever find that it kind of gives you a different perspective on your approach to your school?
Sometimes, not all the time.
In our middle segment, I want to tell people about that because you got a chance to do something really cool this week. Reid, the national correspondent for MSNBC, came to visit Bennett College's campus, and you got a chance to sit down and interview her.
Yes.
Were you pretty excited about that opportunity?
I was so excited. I was nervous, but I was really excited. It was kind of interesting to have someone here who was a correspondent, which I want to be, a writer, an online writer, freelance writer, has her own talk show. She does so much. It was really interesting to get her perspective of a black woman in media.
You've interviewed a lot of celebrities. What's the difference between interviewing Reid and maybe some of the celebrities that you've done in a red carpet situation?
I feel like when I would interview celebrities on red carpet, it was more, not gossipy, but it was more, trying to find out the latest news within what they're doing. But interviewing someone that's actually a correspondent, a writer, somewhere where you want to be, it was more so asking questions on how I can get to where you are and how you got to where you are.
You're looking at this as almost a roadmap towards some of your future goals.
Right.
And did you find her to have a lot of substance?
Yes, like a lot.
I can't wait to hear your interview.
And our closing segment is with our other correspondent, Chelsea Moore, who is a host of the studio show, The Weekly Ring.
I'm looking forward to this one because one of my colleagues, Dr. Henry Vanderbilt Johnson, who is the chair of the Department of Education, is going to be visiting with Chelsea this week. She's got some good questions for him, I bet. And I even think that she's starting a thing where she's going to give people trivia questions.
Let's get into our first segment with our correspondent, Cymone Baker, who will be interviewing one of our Bennett alum, Miss Theresa Bennett-Wilkes.
And this is going to be the first part of a mini-part series which the people on Channel 142 are going to be able to hear. And that's Belle's in Motion. And we'll get a chance to hear about all of the great things that many of our Bennett alumni are doing. And this first segment is a great way to start it out.
Right now we have Miss Theresa, and she is an author, and she also is a Belle in Motion. So it's a pleasure to be here with you this morning, Miss Theresa.
Thank you. I'm really delighted to be here.
So I know that you are a second-generation Bennett Belle, and what inspired you to come to Bennett College?
I believe my mother programmed me in utero because I never wanted to go anywhere else, and my parents, who are now both deceased, used to tell me that by the time I was talking, I was telling people I was going to college.
I know that's right.
So Bennett was always my first choice.
Where are you from?
I came here from Oakland. When I arrived at Greensboro at the old terminal, I actually thought it was a refueling stop. I didn't realize it was an airport. First thing I did was to call my father and ask him to come and get me. And he said no. So I went to campus, and it was the beginning of a marvelous adventure for me. I had the privilege of going to college in a nurturing, loving, but demanding environment. I was among my own people, so there was no question about my worth. It was always reinforced. I was exposed to the best and the brightest of the Black community from around the world as a student. One of the biggest benefits of coming to Bennett is that I left home and went 3,000 miles away. So my parents couldn't come on the weekends, and I had to manage my own money. I was always broke. I had to learn to be on my own, so I grew up.
And it's so interesting that you say that, because I am too from California, and I know the experience of having to come to a new environment and having to basically start your whole life over and really being responsible. And it does grow you up, but I think it makes a better woman out of you.
Oh, I agree.
So
I agree.
how was life like outside of Bennett College as an African-American woman during that time period?
I remember that the colored entrance to the Carolina Theater was still there. And we never went to town alone. You always went in groups, preferably with an older Belle, like your big sister. I felt a difference here. I lived in the Bay Area, and of course, I can remember core signs being placed in businesses that did not hire Black folks to be in the front office. But here, there was just this sense that even though laws had been enacted, that there was still an uneasy sense of coming together. I remember being in Woolworths one day, and a woman got really angry because a group of us were shopping in there, and I remember her walking out of the store. You know, it was like I shouldn't be there. And I didn't quite know how to take it. And I was here when Willie Grimes, who was a student at A&T, when he was shot. And I remember we were under curfew. I'd never before seen the National Guard or tanks, but they were out there on Goral Street. And that memory has never left me, but I came back.
So just being in that time and having the recollection of those experiences, I mean, I know it's never going to leave you.
I hope not. It was, and at 18 years of age, there's a lot I didn't understand, you know.
Because that wasn't your background. That's not what you were used to.
Mm-hmm. There was a grocery store called Issa's, and I remember having trouble getting service because the owner of the store liked for you to say, "Please, sir." And I had a classmate who whispered in my ear, "He wants you to say, 'Please, sir.'" And I didn't.
Wow. And I'm glad you didn't.
Oh, thank you.
How did the Bennett College experience help you as a leader?
Throughout my Bennett experience as a student Belle, expectations were laid out that I, number one, had the skill, had the knowledge, the intelligence to be whatever I wanted to be, that it was expected of me that as a Bennett Belle, I represented not just myself, but our college, our community, and that counted for something, that my self-worth is very important.
Can you tell us about your new book, Anime and the Preacher?
Anime and the Preacher is a collection of short stories that I wrote more than a decade ago. And Anime and the Preacher went live on Amazon on January 3rd, 2015. It just turned my life upside down. It's just been awesome. It's a truly amazing experience because I went from talking about the book to actually having a book. I absolutely love writing fiction.
How did it make you feel to know that people were actually buying the book on Amazon?
Really, really great. It's an humbling experience to have someone say to you, I read your book and I love it. It's also an humbling experience to have someone say to you, I read your book and I can't stand it.
You got that? You had somebody tell you that?
Oh, yeah. The first book I wrote. Well, you see, as a writer, your goal is to connect with the reader. Your goal is to engage the gamut of human emotions. Now, they say that there's just love and fear, but between love and fear, there's outrage, there's titillation, there's exhilaration, inspiration, anger. So if somebody tells you they don't like your book, they're paying you a high compliment, because as a writer, I've done my job.
How can people go and purchase your book?
It's available on Amazon.com in softcover and Kindle, or you can also visit my website, www.alwaysteresa.com. At Amazon, you can plug in the title, Anime and the Preacher, or you can plug in my name, Theresa Bennett-Wilkes. That's Theresa with an H. And thank you for asking.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Ms. Theresa, for joining us with Bells in Motion. Thank you for taking the time out to come and speak with me today and share with us your experience for being here at Bennett College.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
That was a great interview from our correspondent, Cymone Baker. And the best part that I loved about it is that the Bennett alum, Miss Theresa, she also is from California, and I can relate because I'm from California, and I came all the way to Bennett College, which is miles and miles away. We basically had to grow up on our own. So I understand when she was talking about being here alone, not with family, and having to basically grow up.
And I love the part where she courageously refused to say yes, sir,
right,
when she was at the store.
Growing up in California, we don't have to say yes, sir, yes, ma'am. You know, your family members, you might grow up and say that to an adult, but that wasn't big like it is in the South. So.
And I hate when people say yes, sir, because that's an indication that they think you're really old.
Right, right. Okay, so now let's go into our next segment with MSNBC's national correspondent, Miss Joy Ann Reid.
And she'll be interviewed by a future journalistic star, the person that's sitting right next to me, Kiera Kelly.
I'm your host, Kiera Kelly, and I'm here with MSNBC's national correspondent, Miss Joy Ann Reid. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Great to be here.
Glad to have you. We are, on the behalf of Journalism Department, we are happy to have you here as well.
Thank you.
So we're going to get right into it. So what is the work life for you for every day?
So basically it changes day to day. One of the things about this job is that it's never the same day after day. I don't have a routine. Typically, if there is a breaking news or a news story, I'm getting a text or a phone call from the managing editor saying, can you fly to fill in the city? Yeah. And I'm making reservations to get on a flight and go down. And the first thing that I'll do when I get on the ground for a story is try to meet as many local people as I can who can be my sources. So usually my stops will be a barbershop, a beauty shop, and a church. That's a really good place to find out who's who and what's what, right? So I try to find, if not that, a good local diner, a local restaurant where lots of people eat, just some way that I can get to know someone who can tell me what's happening. And of course, also try to contact the primary sources that the story is about. Try to contact the family member, who is the person that we're talking to, will they talk to me? And so trying to gather those stories and actually get my facts on the ground in time to make my live shots, because one of the sort of features of life as a correspondent is that you have to get on TV and do a 60 to 90 second hit about whatever it is you're talking about. So trying to prepare for that, gather information, actually have something to say, find information out, and then get on the air.
Can you talk about your book and also the documentary that's coming up?
So basically, in between my job, which at the time I was hosting a show at MSNBC, and I also am a frequent guest on Primetime, which is a different job. It's really just coming on and commenting on politics or what's happening. I did write a book. I started it in 2013. It came out September 8th. It's called Fracture, Barack Obama, the Clintons, and the Racial Divide. And I really wrote a book about what the two things that I feel I know the best, which is politics and history. And it's a history of race, the Democratic Party, and the country, and how we've dealt with the supposed post-racialism that came from electing the first black president. So that's the book piece. The documentary side, my husband and I own a documentary film company. We've actually been working on this documentary for years and years and years. And unfortunately, the difficult thing about documentary is, A, it takes a lot of time. B, it's very hard to do when you actually have another job or two, which I have too. But that film is called The Fight Years, and it talks about race in the context of boxing and what boxing did to either change the racial dynamic in South Florida or reinforce some of the racial stereotypes.
Have you always been about politics? Because you used to freelance prior to being on the Reid Report. So were you always like, I want to do politics, or was it something else?
Always politics. I mean, when I was very young, when I was in high school, I used to write short stories and really revered Toni Morrison. She was my favorite writer, and I wanted to do that. I wanted to write fiction. But as I got older and sort of started really to work in the world, I realized that my passion for news and politics really was kind of primary. And so the thing that I've really done in terms of career is to really write and speak and talk about what's happening in politics and elections. I am an obsessive voter and advocate for voting, and it's something that I'm passionate about, whether I was working on a campaign or whether I'm talking about campaigns.
Okay. Our professors teach us at, for instance, freshman year that we need to have internships. So do you ever remember your first internship, and what were your duties?
Okay, I am ashamed to say I have never had an internship.
No,
I've never had an internship. I've had a very odd career. I just sort of stumble and bumble into jobs. And also, to be honest with you, I'm a person that came from a household where we didn't have any money.
Okay.
And by the time I started college, my mother unfortunately passed away shortly before I started college, and I inherited what would have been her contribution to my education expenses. So I've always had to have jobs. Like I worked jobs after jobs after jobs to put myself through school. And when I came out of school, there were opportunities for internships that were there, but they were unpaid and I couldn't take them because I just couldn't afford it.
Right.
I had to work. And so I've done things like temp, which used to be a job that doesn't exist anymore, where you would go in and do like word processing. You would do like create presentations for executives. I did a job where I trained executives who used to have secretaries how to use their computers. And I got $25 an hour to do that. And I was like, yes, I will do that. It's not in my field. It's not my career, but I love this money because I have to pay my bills.
Right.
So I've been on my own for so long that I've never had the luxury. So the great thing now is that there are internships where you can at least earn a paycheck, which makes it possible, quite frankly, for people of color to get them. Because what used to be the case was that only affluent people could do internships because they're the only ones who could afford to work for free.
Right.
Because the reality is people hire and promote who they know. And it's very difficult, particularly for people of color, particularly for women of color, to form a network that can help them in corporate America. So for young people of color, young women of color in particular, having an internship is a great way to get into the door, be seen, get to know people, and more importantly, have them get to know you. Because the reality is in business, in corporations, and media, it's not even who you know, it's who knows you.
You were talking about women of color, not just going for the on-air positions and producer positions, but the higher positions. Now, why do you feel like women of color don't go for those?
I often tell people I'm one of the rarest creatures in media. I'm a black woman that works for a black woman in media, and she's in management. But she's alone in management. There aren't any other women of color either at her level or above. So I think it's really important for young people such as yourself, people who want to get in the business, even though you don't see it, try to imagine it. You have to think beyond your sort of visual imagination, because the people making the decisions, the hiring, the budgeting, the resourcing, they're in management. And you can get to management from wherever you start.
You were speaking about internships. So we went to the NABJ conference this summer, and we got a lot of opportunity to network with a lot of people, but I just feel like it was kind of overwhelming because it was so much network. So what is your feedback on how to follow up with these people? Because I know they tell you consistency is key, but if you're constantly blowing up their emails and just getting phone calls and they're not returning it, how do you just get to these people?
And I get a lot of emails because I do give out my email and to pretty much anybody who asks for it. And you do wind up sometimes getting barraged with people who are emailing you. My advice is always email someone when you have something to offer or something to ask, something specific. Hey, I have a great story idea I want you to take a look at because I think this is content you can use. I'm not just blowing up your email for no reason. Because when people hire, they're hiring for themselves. They're not hiring to help you. They're hiring because they think you can do something for them. So really make sure that whatever you're bringing to NABJ, your resume, your CV, your portfolio is really standing out and makes you stand out.
Compared to when you first started and now, do you think as a woman of color you still have to work twice as hard to get noticed as the white male counterparts that you work with?
Yeah. Yes, and I think that the reality is that we still do have a media in which people of color, women of color, are not the majority, and so it is still a struggle. Not only it's not really a competition with your white male counterparts, but really having your voice heard and validated within those organizations, being seen to be as capable and competent, and also the idea of whether audiences receive Black and brown and Asian American faces the same way, and the sort of doubts that you sort of feel are creeping in terms of whether the people who run news organizations really 100% believe that any person that's delivering the news can do it in the same way, can do it with the same objectivity, can do it with the same fairness. And so I think we still do struggle in media. I think it's something that would be fixed by a lot more people being in management, to be honest. The more people of color, women of color, who can be in the room when these decisions are being made, the more advocates that we are going to have as people who actually work on the air.
How important is it to stay close to the topics that mean something to you?
I think you do better reporting when you care about a story. So I think, I'm much more passionate talking about stories that involve Black Lives Matter than I'm about talking about weather, right? I mean, I can read a weather story if I have to, but it's not my passion. I'm not that interested. So I will bring it as much as I'm capable of bringing it, but I probably will bring more and more depth to a story I care about.
Did you watch the Raven Cymone on The View about talking about
Raven.
names? Yeah.
She was so lovely as a little child on the Cosby Show.
So how do you feel about
Little
that, about
Rudy.
her saying, I'm not going to hire someone with the name Watermala Nisha,
Yeah.
but you'll hire someone else. But if Watermala Nisha has the best work ethic.
Right. And by the way, her name is Raven Cymone.
Right.
With an accent
right.
on the E.
Right.
So her name is exactly what she's denigrating.
Right.
And the reality is Raven Cymone, whatever, that E means,
Right.
was able to get the opportunity she got because Carsey Werner, which is the company that produced The Cosby Show, was willing to take a chance on a little girl named Raven Cymone.
Right.
And the reality is, if we're doing that to each other, then what more are we expecting from the larger world? We should have the right to name our children anything we want, right? There are people that are naming their children Apple. That's a real child's name.
Blue Ivy.
Blue Ivy. And if you're rich, you do have the luxury of doing that because your child is set for life. There's
Right.
no one who can stop Blue Ivy from getting
getting a job.
whatever Blue Ivy wants. But for the rest of us, we have the name we're given by our parents. And that shouldn't be a barrier to entry, but it sometimes is. And we know that that kind of discrimination really exists. So I think one of the things that you need to do, if possible, take your name and your skills and whatever you've learned and gained as the things you've learned here at Bennett College, and pack that on your resume, get in that internship, and show those people that you're the best. Because once they know you, once people actually experience working with you and being around you, they won't pay any attention to your name. And always remember that the person who used to be our National Security Advisor and Secretary of State is named Condoleezza, with 2 E's and 2 Z's and 2 L's.
Well, we want to thank you so much for coming to the journalism department and talking to us and giving us advice on how to get started in this industry.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
It's great to be here.
Thank you.
Here, what's the best lesson that you got from that interview?
During the part of the interview, she talked about, no matter where you come from or what your name is, that should never stop someone from hiring you due to your name. Like, your work ethic speaks volumes over your name.
And I hope that's something you'll be able to explore on future episodes of BelleAire Radio.
Yeah. And now let's get into our last segment with our other correspondent, Chelsea Moore, who interviews Dr. Henry Vanderbilt Johnson.
So, Dr. Johnson, how did you arrive at Bennett College?
I actually read about Bennett College in the Chronicle of Higher Education. And when I read the initial overview about the institution, I said, well, gosh, this is an all-women's college. Why would I apply for a position at an all-women's college? So I knew very little about Bennett College at the time, even though I went to school at North Carolina A&T. So then I decided to call to the institution, and of course, a female answered the phone. I said, do you actually employ men there? And they said, yes, we have a lot of men on staff. So I completed my application and sent it in, and the rest is history.
What are some of your goals for the Department of Education this year?
I would like to lay the groundwork toward making Bennett College teacher education program one of the best in the state, if not the nation.
So can you tell me about your recent appointment?
I was actually appointed to the North Carolina Association of Colleges of Teacher Education, normally called NCACT. This is a policy-making organization that addresses many of the issues that take place in higher education in the private sector and the public sector.
How do you think your appointment will bring about change, or how do you feel like you will instill some of the things you learned with this appointment at Bennett College?
Basically, I will have Bennett College at the forefront, but I see this as being a wonderful opportunity to express some of the challenges and concerns about teacher education, and I can be an advocate for all HBCUs.
What are some of the potentials you see in your students?
As I talk with my students, I listen to them very, very attentively. And many of my students aspire now to become school administrators, and they haven't even completed undergraduate work yet, but yet they're thinking further ahead and saying, well, I want to be a school administrator, I want to be a superintendent. And that's part of my job, is to mold and shape them for the greater world, because I want to believe the BS degree at Bennett College is just the beginning of numerous other possibilities.
What is your favorite part about working with the students at Bennett College?
I would say my favorite part is that of being a father figure to all of my students. They come to me, they share personal perspectives, personal challenges, and I love that because I don't have a daughter. And not having a daughter, it seems that I have a host of daughters right now, and I embrace that wholeheartedly.
To end our session or our interview, I want to ask you a trivia question. The Weekly Ring, we will have a weekly trivia question that we'll ask anybody that we're interviewing. So your question for this week is, who was the first president of Bennett College? And I'm going to give you a list of people. So, was it David Dallas Jones, Rosalind Fuse Hall, Willoughby Player, or Esther Terry?
Wow, you caught me off guard. Dr. Jones?
Yeah, it was David Dallas Jones. Ding, 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 you're the winner.
What's the difference having a male teacher versus a female teacher in the classroom?
Honestly, on this campus, I've only had like a few male teachers, I think 2 within this department. And you view them more as like a father figure. They're more...
Or an older brother?
Yeah, like, or older brother. Like, I wouldn't say they're more helpful, but you just go to them more, where the women teachers, you know, we just relate to them on certain things, but the male teachers give us a different perspective on a lot of things.
Who tends to be harder?
I think the males, but in this department, I say Miss Jeffries has everyone beat.
Okay, I know she'll be happy to hear that.
And that's all that we have for BelleAire Radio. Once again, I'm your host, Kiera Kelly.
With Professor Lipscomb, I appreciate you having me on board on Channel 142. And those of you out on satellite radio land, don't turn that dial, because 142, we got good programming coming up for you all day.
Yes, and if you guys want to keep up with any other interviews that we have at Bennett College or events that are coming up, please go to our YouTube channel and subscribe, Bennett College.
And if you want to, as your generation would say, hit us up for more information, or if you have some suggested topics for the future, follow us at Belle Media Group on Twitter.
See you next Wednesday at 4:30 right here on BelleAire Radio.
If you miss us, Friday at 10 a.m. or Monday at 3:30.